So this picture was taken in Malawi in 2016. It was the last few days before I reached the Mozambique border. So I'm going to share a little bit of my life. And I want to take you back to when I was at school. So at school, I'm in the middle there. And by the age of 14, 15, my relationship with food started. I had no confidence. I didn't feel like I was good at anything. I was a target for sort of being teased. And I was always the last one picked in sport. I was the one that used to stand there and they'd be like, Brendan, you're in that team. So I left school. And me and my mum recently were joking that we used to have to buy elasticated trousers for me. So that's kind of interesting. So I left school with only 2 GCSEs. And then I came to university. I taught my way onto a degree, an art degree. But I actually didn't do any art. So again, I was out of my depth again. And then really for 10 years, my life was a cycle of self-destructive behaviour. My weight carried on, and then I lost myself on drugs and drink every weekend. It was lost weekends. I didn't have a focus. And then in 2002 was a dark year for me. I failed uni 3 times my first year, and I actually collapsed and ended up in hospital on a cocktail of drugs. I'd cut off from my family. I was embarrassed of my lifestyle. And I remember receiving a letter from my nan saying, Brendan, please, let us know you're all right. And then something happened. In 2006, a group of friends decided that we'd run a half marathon, or one of the group did. So I said, all right, let's go for it. So I used to get up in the dark in Salford, so no one could see me, paranoid. And I used to go from lamppost to lamppost. It wasn't even 1/4 of a mile, and I hated it. I thought, what's all this? And then after a few weeks, something happened. I started to have structure. I started to have discipline. I found areas in Manchester that I never thought existed. Canal Pass. And then the end of March 2006, I ran my first half marathon, the Wilmslow half. And I remember the last 3 miles thinking, this is hell. I didn't run with a GPS watch. I used to just run until it hurt, listening to music, thinking I was in a nightclub. Crossed the line, and I felt something like, I've actually achieved something. I've done something for me. And I did my first half marathon in 1 hour 24, which at the time I didn't realise was quite a good time. And then a month later, I did the Manchester 10K. It was a lot smaller then. And I actually finished in the top 200 and did it in 38 minutes 05. I then spent the next 2 years racing, and running gave me that sort of structure and discipline. I stopped drinking, and then I went on, and these are some of my personal bests, just there. But it was a trip to Malawi in 2008 that would transform everything for me. I was working at Adidas at the time, and I'd never seen poverty that extreme before. So we cycled across. It was a cycling tour, and these children would run along beside me, no shoes or socks. We'd go to a women's refuge centre where women had been raped, their crops had failed, and I just couldn't get my head around it. But it wasn't until I got back to Manchester that it really sort of kicked in. I sat in by the necks on the Exchange Square, and I looked around and I thought, we've got all of this stuff, but are people happy? And my mind was in Malawi, where all these kids were running with nothing, but they kind of had happiness that we would never understand. So I went back in 2009, and that's when I became involved with Friends of Mulanje Orphans, an orphan care project that support 3,500 orphans. So when I returned, I decided I wanted to do more fundraising for them. So I came up with my first challenge, was to cycle from John O Groat to Land's End. And then with 1 day off, I went on to run the London Marathon. And that was an insight into my mind that I sort of thrived on these back-to-back things. I loved the mindset of a challenge. Coming through Scotland, I suppose it's like mindfulness in another level. I was completely engrossed in that living in the moment. I wasn't thinking of targets or what I was going to have for breakfast. I was completely engrossed in that absolute moment. I then sold everything. The more I sold, got rid of my phone contract, the less I had, the more I felt in control. And everything I got down to was just one bag, so I decided to travel the world. And even though I had an amazing time, it felt like a little bit self-indulgent for me. So when I returned in 2015, I had a meeting with Mary, the founder of the charity, and I said, I want to run the length of Malawi. I want to tie in running, adventure, and making a difference. And I said I wanted to raise money so people can see directly where their money was going. And I was really passionate about education, and I wanted to give back to those children that first inspired me. So we came up with the idea that I was going to run the length of Malawi. So my first ultra run, I ran the famous St Bees, the Wainwright coast to coast, St Bees to Robin Hood's Bay, 192 miles over 8 days. And I started to realise that actually, yeah, I can do this. So the goal was to raise £35,000 to build the art and science block for the secondary school. So Malawi is in the southeast of Africa. It's a landlocked country. We didn't really know the distance, we just knew it was around 25 marathons in 25 days. Mary said to me, Brendan, I wish you were just cycling it and not running it. And I was like, no, I'm going to run it. So I had a team. This is Mary, the founder of the charity. Emma, who's an incredible athlete, she's run across Africa. She's just broken the world record on a lip to go across Australia. She was my support cyclist. And these are all orphans that have come through the charity, and these were my support team. So we travelled by truck. The idea that we were going to camp at schools every day. And we had footballs and netballs, and that was our thank you for letting us stay. This would go ahead and set up tent, and this one would work quite closely with me. So the day itself, you had to beat the heat. So I was up at 4:30, I was on the road by about 5:30. I'd run up to 15 miles, have a break, and then I would rejoin the road up to 20 miles, and then finish the marathon really by around 11:30. This is me at the first school. Everyone had gone off to play with the children, and I was there with those critical thoughts that we all have. Have I taken on something too big? Am I going to do this? This is hot. The poverty is really extreme. But I just kept thinking of all the negative thoughts that have happened to me, turn them around and use them as fuel to succeed. And that kind of was the start then of me just relaxing. Food was quite limited the whole way. We only had Nsima beans or fish or chicken, and that's really my diet for the whole time because they didn't have the supermarkets that we take for granted here. But it was the first school when I arrived that I realised how important this run was. This is the school building. They were sitting the exam when we arrived, and I just couldn't get my head around it. It was just crazy, and I kind of had that image every step of the way that I was thinking, we've got to raise this money, we've got to make a difference. Sometimes running in Africa, in Malawi, it gets a bit out of hand. I'm coming through there with my big nose, and there's lots of fun and laughter. My first obstacle, a baboon. When we were driving up to the north, they had these huge baboons running alongside the Land Rover, and I was like, they're massive, and I got to run up past them. Because I remember them at Long Leap, when they're on the car in front of you, tearing the car apart. But when I got off and started to run, they ran away, and I thought, I'm being pathetic. All the way through Malawi, there was mice on sticks. That's sort of an insight into the poverty in Malawi. I still haven't tried one because I've always been on a challenge, but I would try one. You're probably thinking, what is that? So me and Emma are going down through past the lakeside, and there's thousands and thousands of flies. And there's these women with baskets going like this. And the smell is disgusting. I pull my buff up, my sun visor down, Emma's there like this. And then in the evening, they gave us this, the team, and said, do you want to try it? It was a fly burger. The women were catching flies and moulding them into a fly burger and selling them. Again, that's so reflective of how extreme the poverty is. So I ran for 14 days, 14 marathons. Everything was going to plan. And then we got a message from the British High Commissioner, Michael Nevin, and he was going to come out with police escort, and we were going to run. And that was the day that we woke up. Emma was taken to hospital, and we both had very severe sickness and diarrhea. I led there, and I said to Mary, I'm going to restart at 2 o'clock. I just pictured that school building, and I thought, I've done this, I'm not going to let it slip. Even if I do 1 mile today, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to dig to that level. Luckily, I did pull off 14 miles that day, but it was really a blur. But it was great for publicity there. These are the toys that you'd witness every day. There's no iPhones, no sort of, it's just recycled rubbish. But they kind of have a happiness that we will never understand. And when you're running a marathon back to back, to see that, it's that emotion is, it's hard to get through. This was my shower for 27 days. I think we had one hotel stop. Pretty hard when you've got hundreds of kids. Someone's holding a towel in front of you, trying to wash as much, and then all the kids are going. On reflection, why was I wearing red? I didn't realise I was going to go past any balls, but they didn't get in my way. And then for me, the most important thing, the day, and this has stayed with me forever, and it's helped me achieve what I achieved last summer, which I go on to tell you about in a minute. I'd finished the day. We had about 3 days to finish, and I was up running 32, 36 miles to try and catch up those miles that I lost. And I sat there with the team, and I could see this boy dragging his body along the floor. And I was just like, I can't look, I'm too tired, it's too hot. And this is Gianni, he's 12, both his parents had died. He was no longer going to school anymore. And I just couldn't get my head around that his life was just on the floor. And that kind of put the heat, my niggles, everything into perspective, that everything was just temporary, they were insignificant. And when things got tough, I used to just think, this pain's gonna pass, it's temporary. Fortunately, 3 days after the run, we had a wheelchair at the charity and I went back down, and he's now going back to school. This is one of my favourite pictures from running Malawi. You can see some more toys here. I hope I'm inspiring lots of people that they're capable of so much more, and raising lots of money. But for me, the real inspiration are these children, because they're never going to have the choices and the opportunities that I have. And sometimes you would used to have to stop them and say, turn back, because they would run the whole marathon and they would be so far from their village. And they would just have the biggest smile, and it's given me such an appreciation for life. It's really hard through pictures to show you how crazy it is. So I'm just going to show you this video of the final day of running Malawi.
It's my
So I successfully completed the run. The run itself was 708 miles in 27 days, 27 consecutive days running. Obviously I lost those days, and that's the final 2 days. We raised the £35,000. We managed to start the building before I started the run, and it's now completed. shortly after I finished the run. So they've now got 3 science classrooms and art rather than being taught under a tree. These are now getting the education that they deserve. When I returned, 6 weeks later, it was 5 years after I'd cycled John O Groat to Land's End, and I thought, what better way to celebrate that than to run it? And it really was perfect because I'd witnessed so much poverty, but then I was on my own then doing this run and going through Scotland, the West Highland Way. We live on an amazing island, and it was really nice to absorb all of that stuff and sort of, weigh it all up. This is my PE teacher that came out to find me at Glastonbury, and he said it was really nice that when the student inspires the teacher. And this is Mr. Cobbin, ironically, was my science teacher. And he said, Brendan, I used to look at you at the back of the class and think, you're not going to do anything. How I proved him wrong, he said. So I'd already thought about running across Africa with a long-term plan of going for a world record. So I came up with the idea to run across Africa, the idea being that I would then run through the charity, and I thought it would be quite a good idea. So leading into it, I ran the Ultra Great Britain, 200 miles in 80 hours, and I came 24th at the end of 2017. And then I set off on my biggest run yet, which was last summer. The route took me through Namibia, through the Caprivi Strip. That was interesting. I'll tell you about that in a bit. Then through Malawi, and then I finally successfully ran into the Indian Ocean. This was to raise money for the boys' hostel. We had the girls' hostel that was already complete, which was built behind the art science block. And this was going to give 88 of the orphans that were sleeping rough a home while they get the 5 years education. And that was the building plans. This time I only had one small support team. Again, a cyclist working closely with me because we were going to go through areas of wildlife. So it was important that we had the walkie-talkies and that we could communicate. So here I am, naively running out of the sea. Little did I know what was to come. And by day 3, the doubt was at the front of my head. It was 35 degrees. It was only day 3. I was hot. The water we were drinking was in the back of the truck, was hot. The food was hot. Going into a tent was hot. And I just think, what have I taken on? Am I going to fail this? And then I just broke it down and thought, you've just got to do it. It's a bit of a cliche, step by step. I'm so lucky to be running across Africa. Get on and bloody do it, don't moan. But as runners know, you need that little landmark to run to. And the first 2 weeks, it went on and on. And luckily, I found some shade. I think we might have stayed there a little bit too long. And on. But to wake up to these sort of sunrises was just absolutely magical. There was no one for days, no animals, nothing. But to get up to see that sunrise and sort of see it coming out of the land was just absolutely breathtaking. And just a wild camp. We'd set up and there was a rock to the side here with 360 degrees of pure beauty and tranquility, thousands of stars in the evening. It was magical. This is me in the mornings trying to beat the heat. Bit of a lonely runner there. And then we got to the Caprivi Strip. And it was the first nature reserve. This sort of man came out to open the gate and I said, are there lions in there? Yeah. I said, is this sign real? Are they really all there? I mean, it's slightly different than our deer sign here, isn't it? He said, yes. I said, can I run through? And he said, no problem. Opened the gate and off we went. And it was just, again, really beautiful. Running through Giraffe in the morning, slightly different than running around Salford Keys. And then this morning I really loved, because in the morning you could see in the middle the outline of a giraffe, and that was just very, very special. Then you had zebra, and then I was told don't get in the middle of elephants. That could be the problem, that could be an issue. It's a little baby. Obviously, moments like that are very special. You then have all this to deal with, the poisonous and venomous snakes, so the tents have to be zipped up. Every time you go to the toilet, because obviously I'm going in the bush, you're then freaking out thinking, is there a scorpion? Where do I go? I'm hot, my legs are aching, I've got a cuppy, whatever I've got to do, and you've got that to battle with. Also, mornings like this were quite eerie because we would see loads of antelopes running across, and then the team would be like, could be a lion, could be a cheetah, looks fresh, thanks. And then the first country was done and I reached Zambia, and that was the start of me starting to get really confident. I'd ran every step of the way and I felt like I was getting fitter and stronger, and mentally I was just breaking it down. Again, as soon as we got to Zambia, the children started. And that's a normal day running. Sometimes there could be up to 200-300 children. They'd have to go 5 to 10 kilometres to school. There's no buses. And people always ask me now, how did you feel? Was it safe? All of those questions are very relevant. And this represents the run in some ways. For me, it was 98 days of kindness of strangers. Villages let us camp. They would go to the borehole and say, just help yourself. I said to my mum, can you imagine someone knocking on your door in a Land Rover and saying, can we camp on your lawn? I'm doing a run, and you go in, oh, there's our kitchen, there's our shower, help yourself. We got invited to the government building. This lady came at the right time. We hadn't washed or showered for 14 days. We were on really rationed food. And she came out in Zambia and opened our whole house, and that was really special. And the villages, they were the highlight. They've got nothing, but in some ways they have everything. They have like this happiness, again, that we don't understand. And that was a real highlight. It was always about the people. When I'd covered the marathon distance each day, sometimes I wanted to be on my own. It was so hot, and it was pretty tough because I had to lie in a tent like that, a little mosquito tent. And obviously when you've got hundreds of kids looking at you, you're just thinking, fuck off now. Imagine running one marathon, you get that feeling sometimes. There were extremely low points. My feet got a battering, and mentally I went to a very dark place. Physically it wasn't too bad, but just, that monotonous day in, day out. So only at times, and this really is life at the side of the road.
Hi Brendan. How many miles have you run today?
30 miles.
Pretty much all at once. Well, we had a little break.
Yeah, we had a little break. Porridge.
But not a big break.
Not a big break, and then we still had another 10. There's 9 due. I'm spraying this stuff around me. And then we're going to have some eggy bread.
But the eggy bread?
There's mould on it.
There is. I know. Look. That's the mould. And that's a bit of mould. We are living the high life.
Poor Manuel's got all the life.
Go down, tummy ache.
He had diarrhea cooking up for you.
We're on the side of the road, and there's, we're in the line of all the telegraph poles.
I absolutely stink. My nails are black. My feet, shall I show them my feet?
Oh. I don't know if you're ready.
We ran out of porridge. So in the mornings I used to have cold pasta with tinned fish that was hot plunked on because it'd been the temperature of the truck. So it was literally, there's videos of me going 1, 2, 3. But then when I did find pizza in the more built up areas, I was actually dancing on the tables. And Cheerios became quite a good friend of mine, box at a time. This was the hottest day, 41 degrees.
This is the temperature right now in the shade. It's just gone down from 41 to 40. We're on the side of the road where there's just spewing out hot air, and it almost feels like welcome relief. Brendan's just having a little rest on the side of the road. I think he's melted.
This is just
Horrific.
another level. But I'm on 26 miles, 0.6. So I'm going to have a quick break here. And then I reached Malawi, and that again, I knew it was in the bag then. I felt very confident about the run. And this was a real highlight for me. A man had travelled from the south to go over the border into Zambia. And it was quite a special moment. He's coming in 5 minutes here. So to go across the border into Malawi was incredible. Then running down into FOMO, to the charity, was just crazy. There was hundreds of people. And it was like coming home in some ways, which was very special. I had a police escort all the way through. And this really was what like Malawi was like. The High Commissioner came out, they closed the city, the mayor came out, and it was incredible. And then we reached Mozambique. There was kind of lots of people saying Mozambique might not be that safe. We had to stay to the road. But within the first couple of kilometres, again, this is the children going to school. And they just keep me going. Everywhere we went, I think we caused a bit of a stir. Villages would come down. It kind of was like a domino effect. And I certainly caused a lot of people staring. The roads were quite straight and quite hilly, and that was quite tough because you just didn't look up much at that point. Again, I couldn't do anything without a bit of drama. I finally announced that I had 166 miles left, that I would have ran 94 marathons, 94 days, and then I woke up and I knew I was ill. And I said to the team, we need to get to a hotel, we need to get there now. I was put on a drip. I didn't really eat for 3 days. It was just water. I had antibiotics. And then I just thought, at least my legs are having a rest. That's the first thing I thought. You know, I will come back. So I had 3 days, and then I said, we're going to go back and rejoin where we finished. And if I do 1 mile, then I've done 1 mile, but we've got to get this done. And there were some really tough moments that week. I didn't feel like eating anything, but had to force it. I just had to take moments on my own. I remember that quite clearly. Not even my dance music was sorting me out. But it was the kids that drove me on at the end. Seeing their faces. This was the last few days. Again, it just kept me going. And then finally the sign that I was looking for, 52 kilometres to the island of Mozambique. And we finally reached the bridge. It's like a 2-kilometre bridge. And it was so emotional because everything, like sort of my whole life was in that road. The whole run itself, the ups, the downs. You learn more from the downs than you do the ups, because the days you run well, you just run well. But the days that I had to dig really deep are the days that I learned the most about being determined and going to that next level. And it was certainly an emotional moment. And then I luckily ran into the Indian Ocean. I was so tired, I just didn't. People were like, I thought you were going to dive in or do something. I just like, get the shoes off quick. And then I'd successfully done it. So the run itself was 98 days, 6 pairs of trainers, 91 days of running. I lost 7 days to illness. 40 miles was my furthest in 1 day, and 220 miles was most in 1 week, because it was frustrating because I'd lost six days before and I was trying to catch them up. This run we raised £40,000. The boys' hostel has now started. We still need 20,000 to finish the wall and stuff, but the first block's going to be done, which is amazing. And this is my favourite picture. This sums up why I do these challenges, why I do these runs. This was in Zambia. And for me, I've got a very short attention span. I was diagnosed with dyslexia and attention deficit disorder at 36 when I went back to do my GCSEs, to do my teacher training. I then went on and qualified. But for me, I thrive on these challenges. I don't get bored. And again, it's like mindfulness. You're completely engrossed and living in that moment. And it's really, really beautiful. A lot of people saying, what are you doing now? So I'm back at a school in Little Eva, working with children with learning difficulties. And I'm getting 10 boys outside with autism. So each week as a group, we go around a track. 5 laps is 1 mile. We've now reached, you can see the little pins, we've reached Glasgow now. This was taken back a while ago. And we're trying to get to Land's End. So that's good fun. So what's next? So at the end of next year, I'm going to be flying out to Africa to run the length of Africa, Cairo to Cape Town. The world record stands at 318 days, and I'm planning to go for it. I think that I'm capable of doing it. The last few years doing this ultra stuff, I carried a lot more weight. I'm 3 stone heavier now than when I finished that run. I know what I've got to do. I know mentally what I've got to do. And I will give it my best shot. And I think the success is making the start and having the thought. The rest is just the next chapter. If you want to follow me on social media. I just want to end with, in the back of your mind, there's always those places in the world you might want to go to, or a challenge or a race. Put it to the forefront, because you never know which direction you might go in. I never thought that running, I'd end up doing this. So move out of your comfort zone, give it 100%, and thank you very much. Any questions?
What are you most, of all the things you've done, is there one specific thing that you're most proud of?
I think the Africa one, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it's because it was so long and so big, and I think that I hope that because I wasn't an athlete, or I hope that my story reflects that anyone's capable. I haven't done anything superhuman. I've just done it through a passion and determination. And I just hope that it, whether it's your park run or whether it's, an ultra run, I just hope that that message is sort of spread out. But yeah, no, I'm very proud of running across Africa because it was tough. The videos and that, imagine running a marathon and knowing you've got to get in a tent, you're hot, you're sweating, you haven't got a shower. I would love to have gone into a pub and said, I want salty fries, or anything. So we had really restricted food, but then it's a life lesson, because then I thought, how can I moan about anything? Because that extreme poverty, I'm going to get on a plane and come home. So it's taught me a lot about life and what's important. So yeah.
One other question. The fly burger.
Yeah.
What did that taste like?
I didn't taste it because I want to go back and try
That's not
these.
What made you ill then?
No, it wasn't. No, we think it was because Emma bought an orange. This is my theory, which everyone says, Brendan, it could be anywhere. It was only us two that got sick, but we all were eating the same food. But she got an orange, and I remember specifically saying to her, why are you biting the peel? Because she was peeling it with her mouth. And I said, that's on a market where everyone's touching it. So that might be why we got sick. But she was really sick, yeah. She didn't cycle till the last few days. And there were some videos of me those 3 days where a lot of people were like, what are you doing? I looked quite ill. But I just go into this mindset. I don't know where it is. I sat at work last week and I said, I don't know who that person was when you're on these challenges. Anyone else? Yeah.
You're Africa coast to coast. So did you say that was 4,000 kilometres?
Yeah, it was 2,474 miles, so rounding it up was about 4 or 5 years.
So your challenge next year is going to be 3 times that?
Yeah, so I'm in.
Just so you know.
Shit. Shit. I've put it out there now, haven't I? Basically, that's the top end. So I'm in a lot of communication with the record holder. He happens to be in the same county in Somerset. And he said that when he ran it in 98, but the infrastructure of roads, they reckon you can cut off about 1,000 miles. When you go for a world record, it's just point to point, so you can choose the route. I don't think I've got anywhere near my fittest, my strongest, and now I've got 3 people that were in discussion to get me in the best physical for this challenge, and I really believe I can do it. Yeah. I hope that answers you. Anyone else? Go on.
Do you have a funding project for your North-South run?
Have a what, sorry?
A project that you're looking to fund?
Yeah, I probably will split it. I'd like to do something with autism, because in Africa, because a lot of them get just left. There's 3 at the charity that were just left to die. So I would love to set up a project within the charity where we can take sensory stuff over, and we could have like an outreach ambulance that we could go out in Malawi to start with and then neighbouring African countries. That's my long-term goal. So I'd like to have smaller projects that are very doable, so people can donate to a range, but for the same project. So like whether it's a centre or an autism centre, so you'd have the choice of doing it, yeah.
What's your target in terms of money, please?
Oh, I don't know. I hope a lot. $1 million would be great. I think it's really hard because I think if I was raising money, because I did get a lot of exposure, which I'm very grateful for, and they said, like, you know, if I was raising money for cancer or mental health, people can relate to that. And I think poverty sometimes, when, you know, we see it on Comic Relief, but you turn it off and then you're desensitized from it. So there's lots of people, there's lots of charities, so it's harder to raise money for projects abroad, I think. But I'd hope I would raise a couple of hundred at least.
How do you manage to get your message out there? Is it just through your social media and stuff?
Just really lucky, like pick different people picking up. There was a film director that the reason why I raised so much money on my first one, that picked it up through I think it was Gabby Roslin from the radio retweeted it. He read an article and he'd watched a video where I'd put out and said, if we reach 20,000, we can actually start the building before I start the run. And he ended up donating 8,000 to make it to 20. So I've just had a bit of luck, really. But it's hard, it's very hard fundraising, yeah.
Do you go back to the same people? Because I think you mentioned to me on a Sunday run that Andy Bell from Asia made a massive donation.
Yeah, he's made about 3 now, yeah. Yeah, very
so
kindly,
you
yeah.
kind of say Andy and
Yeah. I'm going to kill myself. Yeah, so yeah. Hopefully I'll raise a lot more, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Did you have a question, sorry?
Yeah, I did, but it sounds stupid now. I was going to ask what sun cream you used.
Sun cream is in a white bottle with 50 on it. Yeah. Anyone else?
Why are you doing another one?
Because I love, you know, like we work, don't we, so hard, and then first of all we've got the chance to do it. So lots of people don't have those opportunities. But I love that mindset that you get in. You know, when you have a day off work and you have a really good day and it's really structured, you get a real sense of high, you get a runner's high. Imagine that on a challenge. You know, you're getting fitter, you're really inspired with, shit, how capable we are physically and mentally. And I love that kind of point to point and breaking it down. So it's very mental. It gives you such a high. You feel like you've been shot out of a gun. Like you feel like completely alive, completely living in the moment. And I think that's why when you know, there's lots of people doing these big challenges, but that's why I think people get hooked and why you then go on and do bigger ones. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on. The school that you work for now, they give you a year off, or do you have to leave that job and then try and find other work when you come back? Or
They said that it would work round it.
oh, that's really good.
Mm. I think they might be seeing a bit of PR side to it. Which I joked with them about that. I said, we are in the Bolton News. Anyway.
You mentioned back in 2002, I think it was, that you came into running because obviously you were almost like quasi-addicted to kind of like the hedonistic lifestyle.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever give up kind of like distance running or ultra running, or do you think you'll go and do another challenge after this one? Massive respect to all the ones you've done, like maybe South America. Or
I think once you do them, you're hooked on them.
yeah.
So I already know what I'd like to do on my 50th year. I want to cycle Alaska to Argentina. But I think I would take a back seat. This is going to be like for me the running, like the big stuff. I do want to go back and race shorter races. I want to, you know, break 3 hours for the marathon, things like that. But I think this will be the last big one, and I would go back naturally. Yeah.
Do you ever think you'll break 1:24 for the half marathon?
Yeah.
That's what everyone's going to take from the stuff.
No, I don't know. Maybe I won't, but maybe, yeah.
You sign up for cross country on the side.
Whoa. Where, am I doing what?
Cross country on Saturday.
Oh no. I'm very out of shape at the minute. Anything else?
Do you do anything in prep for them, like in terms of diet and
Say that again,
obviously you do a lot
sorry.
of training, but do you like really refine your diet to be super healthy before you do
Yeah. I think I'm all or nothing. So obviously when I partied, I took drugs and drinks. Once that switch goes for me, yeah, I get in, yeah. I've just signed back to Slimming World. I lost 3 pounds this week, so it's a start.
There are some festivals out in the African desert. Do you ever kind of like...
Are you trying to send me back to my old life?
Tempted to combine the two a bit, everyone's looking to relax a bit.
Wow, I would quite like it, yeah. No, I've got thoughts about it.
Okay, thank you, Brendan.
Thank you so much for coming, thank you. Thank you.